Welcome everybody to the War and Peace Baseball Podcast. Here today with Ray Estrada. I'm Alex Zui, and it's a two-man crew today. How you doing?
I'm doing well.
You just recently released a new article about the unwritten rules of the game, which are very relevant this week. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about what you wrote?
Okay, so earlier today I read an article by a guy's name. His name is Jason Wilson. He writes for thescore.com, which is just a general sports. I have it as an app. It's a Scores Everything News. And he said it's time to erase the unwritten rules of baseball. He's talking about the Manny Machado incident this weekend, where the ball, Matt Barnes threw a pitch right behind his head, for retaliation for him spiking Dustin Pedroia at second on Friday, and it's a whole mess right now in terms of people trying to judge it. So my take on it, he says that we should do away with this revenge factor of hitting guys. I completely disagree with that. I've seen a couple other articles too. They say, oh, if you hit a guy in the head, they always throw out the word kill. They throw out the word kill. They're saying, why would you kill a guy to retaliate? And that's just way too extreme. That's too much of a reach. How many guys have we seen hit? How many pitchers who don't have helmets on getting hit by balls that are traveling much faster than the 90-mile-an-hour fastball that Matt Barnes threw? They come out of it. Granted, I agree there's a possibility that a well-placed ball in the wrong spot could kill somebody, but it's not the majority result of getting hit in the head with a baseball. And the thing is, nobody aims at heads. Unless you're a really dirty player, you're not going to aim at the head. When guys try to throw really hard, they often lose it high. He's not aiming at head. And to make the case for the retaliation, going back to the article, Wilson says you gotta let your play on the field get revenge. Well, Machado hit a double. And so let's say the Red Sox didn't throw at him, and what's I said this in my article, what's Barnes supposed to do? He goes, to say to Pedroia, sorry bro, I tried to stand up for you by striking him out, which he's trying to do anyways, but he got a double or even a home run off me. No, it's a lot easier if you're a good enough pitcher, although they are good enough pitchers, but it's hard to hit exactly the spot you want to hit every time. But it's easier to just plunk a guy in the ribs, or I prefer the shins. That's my philosophy, because that hurts. It hurts in the shins, and plus it's a lot farther away from the head. It's a lot easier to do that, to send a message. The message being sent is, don't fuck with my guy. That's what you're sending a message. And if you're gonna let guys, you can't let guys get away with that in baseball, because otherwise we'd have bat flips galore. Not saying bat flips are all a bad thing, but everybody would be throwing their bat as hard as they could, and people would be drag bunting whenever they want, up 10, up 20. The thing about being that in unwritten rule baseball is that it's like I call it personal economics. There's a trade-off for doing certain things. Going back to Jose Bautista, that bat flip in the 2015 ALDS, I had no problem with that. It was a big home run, and it was big, but it wasn't show-uppy, I guess. Maybe a little bit, but I had no issue with it at the time.
It was absolute what? Not show, that bat flip was not meant to show up the other team. Come on.
I switched my mentality halfway through, but going back to that, and then he gets hit the next season, but that should be expected. It should be in his mind that he bat flipped on the same team in a big situation, and there's going to be consequences for that. And that's what baseball has been like for as more or less as long as it's been played. If they're essentially, how do I put this into words? I mean, it's not always shown of their team, but you got to defend your reputation, and it's not a cowardly thing as he suggests it is. He's saying it's cowardly to go out by hitting a guy. You're defending your teammate who got hit. That was the Jacoby Jones incident on the same day. He got hit in the face, and then they threw behind Sano, which is reasonable enough. We see that happen all the time. It's essentially an eye for an eye, and he said the quote "eye for an eye makes the whole world blind." But the reality is it's part of the game, and to say that the risk of death, which I just said we've seen, is there, but is not really as major as they make it out to be. And like you said, it's a lot easier to hit a guy. Let me go to my article. It's a lot easier to hit a guy than to strike him out to show revenge. So he talked about too. He talked about also it's a free base. That's basically saying what he's suggesting is that you think it's a good idea to. He's basically saying that how I interpreted it was that he was saying that pitchers who retaliate like that aren't aware that it is a base runner. They are completely aware that they are putting a guy on first base. There are times when revenge is completely warranted, but because it's a close game in late innings, they're not going to hit that guy. And like you said, if you're up a lot, it's a cheap shot. So then but the thing is, the revenge has already been taken out on the field by being up by so much. So I don't know. It kind of came off to me as this kind of preachy, this unwritten rule, it's so old. Can't we just let her play? No, I made the analogy to hockey. I don't know if that's a false equivalency, but guy gets hit in hockey, even just clean hit. Another guy's going to get the guy the guys are going to get each other's grills because they're defending their teammate. They're going to get in a fight. It's almost a positive thing when you hit a guy, not saying in the head, but it's.
So I can.
If you want to jump in and help me, I
think you might be a little bit short on breath there. That was quite a speech there, but I think the main point of your article is clear: is that there has to be some level of accountability, and there has to be that level of camaraderie, and I guess you could say the ability to protect your teammates. I think protect is a good word to use there. By retaliating in a way that's effective, because there's no real way to retaliate other than hitting a guy, because that's basically the only controlled situation where you can retaliate in such a manner.
Exactly. That's the best shot you have. It's easier to hit guy with one pitch than to try and strike him out with 3 pitches.
Well, that's obviously what a pitcher's trying to do anyway.
Exactly.
I'm going to go ahead and mention a couple things that I think you were not really clear on. I'm going to go ahead and say that throwing at people's heads is not okay with anybody, even those that are okay with retaliation.
No, it is. I'm not okay with throwing at people's heads, and I think there are very few instances where people intentionally aim at the head. The one this past weekend, I don't think was.
But I do think that in a case like that, suspension is necessary.
No,
Barnes did receive a 4-game suspension.
Yeah,
for that.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying because retaliation is warranted. That's the other side of the trade-off. If you want to get revenge at the same time, you need to realize that you might face suspension.
Right, and another thing that I want to kind of make a distinction on is you brought up Jose Bautista and the nature of that bat flip in particular, but in general, a very fiery player, very emotional player. Let these guys be emotional. Don't take it personally if you're someone on the other team that gets offended by an emotional reaction. Unless it's directed at you or one of your teammates, then you have no reason to be upset with a guy for celebrating in that kind of manner. And I think that's the part that has changed the most since your traditional unwritten rules of baseball, is that there's a lot more leeway in regards to things like bat flipping and getting to display all these very kind of questionably emotional responses, and I think that's the biggest difference there. But
yeah, I mean that was the second part of my article, and the second part of Wilson's article is that, I mean, I agree with him. I agree with him in the fact that celebration should happen. You should be able to get excited. He talked about the Stroman thing that happened yesterday, and people were all up in arms about that. I didn't see the thing, but it didn't sound like you said, unless you're actually directing it at the other team or the player, I think it's fine. Bat flips in and of itself, I think, is a little bit directed towards the other team, or it has become that nowadays. I mean, you see all these things on social media, all these like people who do crazy bat flips. It's a little bit, like I said, it is kind of shown at the other team, but yeah, I mean that part of the unwritten rules has changed. It's a lot looser with that, and I think you make a good point there.
Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on these specific instances that happened this past week. For one, with the Tigers Twins scuffle that happened, Jacoby Jones took one right to the face, and that one, it was ugly. It was not a pretty thing at all. Like just pouring blood. I'm sure he broke some teeth and some other parts of his face. That is not okay. That, like, I don't care if it's intentional or not. That kind of pitch in that area is not okay. I'm totally fine with the way they retaliated. That was one of the more traditional, as you said, eye for an eye instances. That's fine. Miguel Sano pushed the catcher and he got a 1-game suspension. That's, not a big deal. The other situation was handled incredibly poorly. That could not have gone worse for them. For one, Machado's slide was not malicious in any way. He slid a little bit late, and there's rules in place that make it so the runner on first will be out in that situation, and that's fine. It encourages guys to slide earlier and not go after the fielder, but if you do it wrong, it penalizes you. But Machado clearly was not trying to do anything to harm Pedroia. He was immediately really apologetic. He was trying to help him up. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the intent behind that slide, and it did put him on the DL, put Pedroia on the 10-day deal. That's fine. And Eduardo Rodriguez earlier in that game, on 3 different occasions in one at bat earlier in that game, threw inside, threw some pretty good pitches around waist high that would have hit Machado to send the message, and Machado backed off the plate, didn't quite get hit, but that's your shot at retaliation. That's got to be it. You cannot just keep firing at the guy until you get him, because that is just a little bit ridiculous. I think the same thing happened with with Syndergaard when he was facing Chase Utley the year after the World Series. He missed the first one by a lot, and then went back and tried to do it again. Like you missed your shot. You're throwing 100 miles an hour. Just stop. Like you can't just keep hucking at the guy until you happen to get him. Like it's not something that will go very well for you. It's kind of a stupid thing to do. You'll obviously get ejected and possibly suspended. And it's just not not a good. It's not good etiquette. It's kind of
exactly
kind of lousy to just
as kind of barbaric as intentionally hitting someone sounds. There's still like unwritten rules to that. It's like you said, etiquette to that and how to do it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go and reiterate that I'm completely fine with retaliation. I think it's necessary for establishing that you're gonna protect your teammates at all costs, and there is that sense of camaraderie. There's also a sense of strategy involved with pitching in a lot. If you're gonna tell a guy, I'm not afraid to go in and plunk you, then that backs the hitter off the plate. He is gonna have a much more difficult time out there. That's a little bit different though. So I'm totally fine with pitching in and hitting guys for retaliation, and I think that was the gist of what your article is all about. If you want to,
I mean, it's
read about it more, of course.
Yeah, it's a little bit. It's a little bit wordy, but that's the core. I think you actually kind of pointed out my argument to me more clearly, is that it's more of an argument that retaliation is fine. That's what it boils down to.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go ahead and move on to all the more recent headlines and stuff going on this week and over the past weekend. A couple of big series sweeps in some division rivalries here. The Nationals went ahead and swept the Mets over the weekend. Not a lot to be said. It was a pretty straightforward sweep. Daniel Murphy hit a grand slam against his former club. That was pretty fun. I think nothing too much going on in these games. Nothing quite as interesting as these scuffles that we were seeing. Nothing very fiery and heated. But, it is an important series nonetheless. The Nationals and Mets are basically the only two contenders in this division. And, it's going to be interesting going forward with them. I think Steven Strasburg skipped a start today because of paternity leave. But, both these teams still have a lot of their guys on the field for the most part. One notable player missing this weekend was Yoenis Cespedes, who was out with a hamstring injury, but I'm all for seeing Michael Conforto play a little bit more. I've been on the Conforto bandwagon basically since it left the station, I guess you could say, because Conforto had himself a very nice weekend. I think he hit a couple homers, one of them off of Max Scherzer, which is no easy feat, no cheapie there. I still love this guy as much as I did when he first came up, and tore it up that first half of the season he played. What do you have to say about Conforto and what he has to offer for this team going forward?
I think Conforto is a very good player, and he's shown it on the field. He's just kind of in an unfortunate situation with a clogged outfield with big contracts in front of him.
Don't let her
I think if he's in a system where he doesn't have a big name guy in front of him like a Granderson or a Cespedes or a Jay Bruce, he easily plays his way into the lineup. But because you have those names there, he was essentially the odd man out.
Yeah, he absolutely needs to be in this lineup. And I felt that way for a lot of last year, and I've kind of been slowly degraded down to the point where I've accepted that the Mets will just not let him play unless something happens to one of these guys. And, Cespedes getting injured is the first shot this season he's got at a somewhat regular role. But, even when he comes back, you got to find a way to put him in the lineup. There's no way that a player this young and this talented can be on the bench. I don't care how much you're paying Granderson and Bruce. It just doesn't work that way. Or you gotta trade one of them. That's basically
I was about to ask this question. How much value would Conforto have on the trade market if they somehow don't get him into the lineup?
No, don't trade Conforto. I meant trade either Bruce or Granderson.
I know, but
trying to do.
Let's say the Mets are big idiots and they.
Oh, they are big idiots, but yeah. Let's
and they say, oh, we don't want this issue. So instead of trading a guy in front of him, just letting Conforto come in and play, they're going to trade Conforto away.
What would you get for Conforto?
That's kind of what I'm asking.
That's a very steep price for any team.
I
can't even put together a reasonable prospect package for him. Nothing off the top of my head. You could probably get a pretty high end middle infielder for him. A very established middle infielder at the very least. Possibly some other prospects. I don't know. That is not a situation you see very often where you even discuss trading a guy like Conforto with lots of team control. And, obviously he's a very young player and a guy who's already put together a pretty nice track record. He struggled a little bit last year. But considering that, this is your typical prospect that just blows through the minor leagues with his bat, breaks into the big leagues, has a very hot start, has a little bit of a sophomore slump, but is still a very, solid outfielder for, one of the two contending teams in this division. There's no reason not to play him. I think that's all there is said and done.
Yeah, my question was just that entertain the hypothetical moment of the show.
Yeah, I seriously have no idea, even hypothetically, what they'd have to give up there. Yeah, another big series this past weekend was the Rockies. They swept the Giants at home, and they even shut them out in their in the Sunday game. Shut out at Coors Field. How about that? The Giants really can't hit. That's what it boils down to. It's ugly for the Giants. It's not so much about the Rockies. Like we know what kind of team they are. They're a really solid offensive club. And their pitching has overperformed so far, I think.
Yeah, you can say their starters have.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can definitely say their starters have.
I'll go ahead and give credit to Kyle Freeland, who's the one who started that shutout against the Giants. They're another young pitcher for them. Senzatella had another nice start at home. I don't expect the Rockies to keep up this level of production at home in terms of pitching, but the Giants are seriously not doing much about their offensive problems. They brought up Christian Arroyo just today, and he's been a guy in their farm system for a few years now, been in the top 100 prospects for a couple years. He could be an interesting player, but not the solution by any means. So I have no idea what the Giants are going to do beyond that because, they still have outfield issues. Their main producers are not producing. Buster Posey's off to an awful start.
Yeah.
I don't see them turning it around all that smoothly, I guess, is the point. So I think there needs to be some sort of catalyst. And I don't know if Arroyo is the answer. Who knows? He could be. Yeah, I'm certainly going to be keeping an eye on him. Looks like he's going to play third base, and Nunez is going to go to left. But, beyond that, I'm at a loss. They need to trade for somebody, That's what it feels like at this point.
Yeah, well, their Giants voodoo magic has run out, I think. It is an odd year, and they haven't made the playoffs in the past few odd years. But, yeah, like you said, just nobody's hitting, and Posey's really the only guy that you look at that in that lineup and you can say that he's like legitimately slumping and he'll rebound and hit well, but everybody else is so inconsistent in that lineup that it's hard to project, and there's still questions with their pitching.
Yeah, and that's not helped by Madison Bumgarner, who hit the DL with a dirt bike injury of all things. Yeah, 6 to 8 weeks.
So they lost their best pitcher and they lost their best hitter. That's not good.
Oh, okay. They didn't lose their best hitter.
Bumgarner might.
Oh, I see what you did there.
Yeah. I was making a joke.
It was really fun early on, and now it's getting a little bit old. The whole Bumgarner is the best hitter on the Giants thing. It's just not true. It's funny to talk about here and there, but it gets a little bit insulting to the Giants hitters who, they're slumping right now, but they're still putting up better numbers than Bumgarner would in the lineup. So, Bumgarner this time around was the big idiot and, was doing something he definitely should not have been. And he admitted that, it was a really stupid thing to do, and he feels bad about it, as he should. But he'll be back in 2 months. There's no reason to worry about him. I think he'll be back full strength. I think he has some bruised ribs and screwed up his shoulder a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think that'll hinder him too much. I don't know if you guys knew this, but Madison Bumgarner is a pretty tough guy. I think that's something that a lot of people don't know about him.
First ever DL stint in his career.
Is this really his first ever DL stint?
Yeah.
Oh man, talk about
Yeah.
That's what it took, huh? It wasn't something.
Yeah, no, it wasn't like a hamstring strain or a tricep strain.
He didn't hit the DL by wrestling a bear or something. That would have been my first guess. No. All right, maybe next time he will. So yeah, Giants not in good shape. They need to shake things up a little bit. Maybe Arroyo's the answer, maybe he's not. Those are the main headlines from the weekend. I think it's a relatively slow weekend. Anything else that you wanted to throw in there that you found notable or interesting?
No, not really. I kind of glanced at the standings for the first real time, and I mean, there are some surprising teams. The Dodgers are a game below, or 2 games below 500 now. They just lost to the Giants. But the Rockies and
Matt Cain of all people. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jesus.
No, I know. Believe me, I'm really frustrated right now. But there are some surprising teams, and I mean, it's at this point in the season where you might start to get a little bit worried. But you start to really see the good teams really find their groove mid to late May. Maybe some of the hot teams that weren't supposed to be as good are going to fall off. So there is a level of concern right now, especially with teams like how the Blue Jays has started off. But it's still a long season to go, and we haven't seen the separation yet. We're still 20 games into the season. We have 142 more to go. So don't panic if you're struggling right now. If your team is good enough, they'll find their way to the top eventually.
Yeah, I've still got my panic button stashed away until mid-May at the very earliest.
You would agree that mid-May is the earliest where teams start separating themselves. You would see.
Yeah, and I've heard this a lot. Obviously everybody's gonna say it's early in the season. I can't make too much out of this, but it gets to a point where these games do count just as much as games in September do.
Yeah.
It could come down to this slow start, for a team like the Blue Jays. Even if they come back and play like the Blue Jays, they're going to have to make up a lot of ground, and that could mean them making the wild card or not making the wild card.
Especially in that division too.
Yeah, these games matter for everybody. The teams that are off to hot starts, that's really nice, but I think it's even more detrimental to the teams that are off to really slow starts, working out of that hole there early in the season. So let's go ahead and move on. We'll bring it on over to our war report, which is a thing that we're doing every week for the most part. Right now, I'm still just giving the season totals. Eventually, as it moves along a little bit more, I won't give the season totals every week because it's just going to be Mike Trout every single week at the top of that leaderboard. But right now, there's a little bit of parity. There's some interesting names in here that I'd like to mention. The top of that would be Bryce Harper and Freddie Freeman. Those aren't necessarily the interesting names. They are both 1.7 win players so far this season, and there's no surprise there. Both of them went off last week, and I think that's about what you'd expect from those guys. A few names that aren't as likely on this list. Eugenio Suarez is a 1.6 win player so far this season for the first place Reds. Actually, no, the second place Reds. The Cubs. The Cubs took over again this weekend, but I think the Reds still hold on to that second place spot.
Yeah, they're a game and a half out.
Yeah.
What's correct?
The red hot Reds, you could say. Thanks to this guy, I guess. You look at Joey Votto is obviously the big name.
Yeah.
Possibly even
Suarez has been very good for my fantasy team, so I'm happy.
I'm sure a lot of Eugenio Suarez fans are ecstatic right now. He's not a bad player. He's a good producer. I don't think he's gonna hit 370 or whatever the heck he's hitting right now, but a solid bat. I think he's pretty safe in that lineup. I don't think the lineup's safe, but I think he's safe.
Yeah.
So there's that. And a few more players that are 1.5 win players this season. Chris Sale, that's about expected. He's striking out 12 batters a game so far. What else is new? Eric Thames is doing his thing. He thamed the Reds again. I'm gonna make that a thing, by the way. I'm gonna make that a verb.
7 of his 10 home runs are against the Reds.
Yep, and I think. Yeah, I'm gonna look up how many more games he has against the Reds, and I'm gonna base my season projection based on that number, basically, because he has their number. He actually hit a couple homers off of lefty Amir Garrett today.
That didn't help my fantasy team today.
No, neither did. I'm in the same situation there, but I'm not concerned. I'm not concerned.
No.
Pitchers all around the league will be getting Thamed soon enough, I think. He looks like the real deal.
Yeah.
He hit a couple pretty good lefty breaking balls out of the ballpark to each field, to right field and left field. He looks good out there. I think he's gonna hit a little bit of a learning curve, maybe midway through the season, but for the most part the approach is there, and there's a clear difference between his first go round in the big leagues.
Yeah.
So.
Did you see that story? It was one of the Cubs. I don't know if it was a coach or if like a front office guy. He said, "Oh, his body type looks different." Like basically, like giving you a really so tweeting that he's on steroids now. Talking about a start. Did you see that?
I mean, I think everybody in the league wants to believe that he's on steroids, but maybe he's just.
But nobody took a thinly veiled shot at him like the Cubs guy did.
I think there's plenty of assumption. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? There's plenty of speculation going on. That's what I'm looking for.
But then I saw a headline today that said he passed a bunch of drug tests in the KBO, which says nothing.
Yeah, the KBO's drug tests. I'm not nothing against the KBO, but I'm sure they'll take their big sluggers where they can get them, no matter what they're putting in them. And I'll mention the last 1.5 WAR player here, and that's Steven Souza Jr. for the Rays, the headliner between in the Will Myers Trey Turner trade, right? So far he's leading that bunch between Will Myers and Trey Turner. I don't think that's gonna last. Is that a bold prediction? I don't think it's that bold.
No, I mean he's not gonna hit for the average that he said. He hit like something like 400 last week, which is why he was named AL Player of the Week along with Harper in the NL. He's not gonna hit for that kind of average. He'll have power numbers, so he'll make some spectacular catches. But yeah, it's just a hot week, really.
Yeah, I agree there completely. Let's keep it rolling along, and we'll mention a few more injuries in our injury update. We already mentioned Bumgarner, and Cespedes is out with that hamstring. Miguel Cabrera is another notable player that hit the DL with a growing problem.
His annual DL stint.
I think, he's a guy that's always got something bothering him, and he's able to hit regardless of that for the most part.
Yeah.
I think at this point...
His swing is so solid. Like, I mean, he's gonna hit for average at least, even if his legs aren't totally under him.
Yeah, best pure hitter in the game in my book still. Pedroia, as we mentioned, was on the DL from the Machado incident. Sorry. Pederson also in the DL with a groin injury there, and Garrett Richards moved to the 60-day DL. Not a good sign there.
No, I mean, what else have we heard except that it's just lingering bicep tightness? I'm concerned about why it was moved to the 60.
Yeah, I am too. I don't even care if it has to do with the plasma stem cell injections or whatever. I'm just not trusting it right now.
Yeah, well, because when we talked about it on our first fantasy podcast, I think we both kind of said he was a guy to at least look at, because it was just it wasn't an elbow issue. It was just a tight bicep and 10-day DL and then we'll be back. But this is really concerning that he's on the 60 like this.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but it's very possible that he's overcompensating in some way, or there's some side effect that's affecting. I think there's nerve endings in his bicep that aren't that are causing this right now. I'm no expert, but I am concerned about Garrett Richards, as are most people, I'm sure. There's plenty of other players in the DL. The DL list has been absolutely abused, as we've mentioned. Tons of pitchers and very relevant players on the DL right now, but these are the main ones that I think matter. I'm not going to go through every last one of them.
Yeah.
So that's about all we have. This has been a pretty slow week for news anyway. Yeah, but we will be back with our fantasy podcast later this week as well. And, of course, we talked about Ray's article for most of this podcast. You can check out the entire thing by checking out our website. Link for that will be below, and we will try to upload more articles in the future at a more regular pace than we had been in the past, in the off season. So that is something to be on the lookout for. As always, feedback is very much appreciated. Tweet us at WPB_podcast, and leave us any comments in on these videos. You can leave us comments on our Facebook page, which all of that stuff will be in the description below. So thank you for joining us. As always, Ray.
Peace.